Hey guys, it's Pan here from Show Don't Tell, the YouTube channel which teaches you how to become a bit better at shooting videos. And if you want to apply that to film stuff, even better. So what have I got in store for you today? I do have something very interesting for you. If you're not familiar with shooting in higher frame rates, that's what we'll learn about today. So normal videos are, if you're in Europe, you tend to shoot 24 or 25 frames per second. A lot of filmmakers like to do 24, but a lot of them do also do 25 frames per second. And a lot of American videographers or filmmakers, they do 24 or 30 frames per second. And as you may have seen in one of my other videos, that's to do with how light is distributed in these regions. So in Europe, electricity is 50 hertz. In America, it's 60 hertz. So if your frame rate is divisible by that, then you won't get any flickering, or you might not fall into getting flickering in your shots. So very important to keep to those frame rates. But I am in Europe, so I tend to shoot at 25 frames. So that today I'm going to shoot in 50 frames or 100 frames, which is 2 times or 4 times the normal frame rate. So I'm going to show you how you do that, what your settings have to be at, and more importantly, what your shutter speed needs to be at, and then just show you how it is that you can then turn that into a very nice, smooth, slow motion shot. Normally, if I shoot in 25 frames, like you can see here, the shot's looking normal, movements looking normal, everything's fine. But then if I try to say halve the speed, so I want slow motion, it will start looking like this. Now that isn't too bad. It's still slow motion, it's cool, but that's a very old-fashioned way to pull off slow motion. If you want nice and smooth slow motion, especially because having, slow motion can help you create better looking shots. They can help you, your shots look even more stable. It might just look nice and smoother, whatever it might be. This is how you do that. So I'm now going to go on to doing 50 frames. If you're in America and you're shooting in 30 frames a second, then you want to be at 60 frames a second, because that will give you half the speed later. So I'm using Lydia again today, just as our subject, so I can show you how this works. So I'm now at 50 frames per second, or as I said, you can be in 60 frames, and I'm shooting the same shot pretty much. And now I will halve the speed, and as you can see, it now looks smooth. The motion is nice and smooth. So how is it that it's now smooth even though before it wasn't? Well, when you're shooting higher frame rates and you slow down the speed of the video, there's more frames for it to slow down to. So everything becomes smoother because you have a lot more frames to work with. Well, say you do 25 frames a second, and you halve that, you're effectively doing 12.5 frames a second, which has that bad clunky looking slow motion, while you want the nice smooth one. And if we jump into the edit quick, it's very simple how you can pull this off, because a lot of people get confused with when you do shoot it. What people tend to do is they'll take the 50 or the 60 frames and they'll go create a timeline which is 50 or 60 frames, but that's not the way to do it. You want to stay in the same frame rate as shooting normal, not in slow motion, i.e. 25 or 30 frames, depending on where you are. So say, for example, my 50 frames a second, I'm going to put it into the 25 frame per second timeline, right? Now, when I do that and I just play it like so, you'll see the footage is normal, right? Even the 50 frames becomes 25, and because it uses interpolation, it still works out smoothly, it's all good. But I now halve the speed, and as you can see, suddenly it's turned into that really nice, smooth slow motion. What some people do, especially beginners, like you might be a beginner at shooting and editing, you'll go put a 50 frame per second video in a 50 frame per second timeline, and then you halve the speed and it doesn't work, and you're sitting there thinking, but I thought if I shot at 50 frames, I can halve it and I'm all good to go. Not quite. What you do want to do, as I said, is go to your normal frame rate, which will be 25, and then you halve the speed of the clip, and it gives you that smooth slow motion. And then obviously you can apply this theory to higher frame rates. So this is now 100 frames per second. So what I did here is I then quartered my speed, right? So I went to 25% speed, which is a quarter of the speed. And as you can see, it looks slow motion again. And if I play the 50 frames per second in quarter of the speed, you will see it starts to look a bit clunky again. It's not working. So once again, it is very, very important that depending on how slow you want to make it, you shoot at the right frame rate. So yeah, that's kind of how that works. Now, the final thing that's very, very important with what I'm doing here, your shutter speed. So if you're shooting 25 frames per second or 30 frames per second, at 25, you want your shutter speed to be 1/50. At 30 frames, you want your shutter speed to be 1/60. So whatever your frame rate is, your shutter speed is basically twice that number. So 25 frames per second becomes 1/50. 30 frames becomes 1/60. So then if you apply that to higher frame rates, you've got to always make sure your shutter speed's double. So 50 frames then becomes 1/100. 60 frames becomes 1/120. 100 frames becomes 1/200. This is very important because it's to do with the motion blur. If you have those values as I told you there, and obviously as you go higher with the frame rates, you always want to make sure the shutter speed is twice, you will get the correct motion blur for your footage. If you say shot 50 frames per second at 1/50 shutter speed, not the end of the world, it'll still look okay. And sometimes I tend to do that when, say, I'm shooting an event, because I don't have much time to add any more light. It might be I'm doing things quickly because events come and go, so you want really fast lenses ideally, so you don't have to, you don't have too much time to be adding too much light, except maybe a light panel at the top of your camera, etc. But if you do 1/50, not the end of the world, but the motion blur will be slightly incorrect. So that is it from me today. I truly hope you enjoyed that and you learned. This is something that took me a while to learn back in the day, but we are so lucky these days, the technology that's out, having YouTube, being able to watch tutorials. So I hope that helped you learn very easily. Thank you very much. There are more videos to watch. If you'd like, you will see them linked in the video at the end. And yeah, that was, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you guys next time.